Hello, everybody, and welcome to Unit 3, the Rocky Mountain Mutual Memo. Let's get started with some details, and we'll start with where we are located for this case, and that's Rocky Mountain Mutual. They're an insurance company. They're located in Utah in a rural area. That is important to the case, and I'll explain why in a little bit. So who's involved? You, as the writer, are Joe. You're the manager of the claims department. And then several rings above you is Zach, and he's the VP of operations. So Zach is a money guy. He cares about the bottom line, and he's a long-term employee. He's got a lot of seniority, and he's very stubborn and set in his opinions and beliefs. The big problem here is that Zach wants to shut the fitness center down and reallocate that area of the building for a purpose that could make money instead of cost money, which is his perspective. He thinks that fitness is pointless because he's not fit himself. So your task is to write a memo as Joe to Zach to convince him to keep the fitness center open. So this means that you have to show him that it can be valuable. When you're putting together these pieces, knowing your reader cares about the bottom line, your approach then is to meet him there and show him that the bottom line can be impacted positively by keeping the fitness center open. You should write professionally in this memo, but not ridiculously so. So let's step back a minute and think about Unit 1. In Unit 1, we also wrote a memo, and in this case, we were writing down the ladder to a group of employees, giving them a directive with instructions and the deadline. So there's a certain tone that we had in that letter where we tried to balance, positivity, since we knew we were giving instructions the readers didn't like, balancing that positivity with directness and being firm that this is not an option, there's a deadline. In this case, we have something new to balance, and that is having a respectful tone, but also one that is familiar and kind of casual, because as we can see from the interaction, they have a solid, healthy working relationship. There's no reason to be overly formal, like you're writing to the president of a company who sits in, the ivory tower office who you've never met personally. So this is going to be an interesting tone for you to discover in your writing, where you're writing up the ladder, but also being conversational. So let's talk about some tips. Do remember your formatting. So we're going to stick with single spaced paragraphs with an extra space between each paragraph, no indenting on the left, like we are used to in academic writing, and keep your font simple, but also don't feel limited by Times New Roman. You can be creative a little bit and choose your preferred font. You can even change up the coloring if you want. Don't go crazy, but you can be creative when you design a piece of writing, even if it's a basic business memo. And the same goes for your margins. I noticed that in the last couple of assignments, people tend to really stick with the 1 inch margins all the way around, but I tend to prefer a 0.5 inch margin all the way around. And that just gives me quite a bit more space to work with on the paper, and I think it looks nicer too. So experiment with your margins, especially when you need room. And like I said, feel free to be creative and include visuals as well. Make sure for this assignment that you're using outside research, at least 2 sources, minimum of 2. 3 is good too. You can do 5 or 10 if you feel like it, but 2 to 3 is about what I normally see, and I think it's enough. Use images and beyond just being creative and putting images in your work, you also are going to create a data-driven graph using Microsoft Excel to represent some of the data that you find in order to convince Zach that the fitness center can be profitable. A couple of don'ts. So the fitness center cannot sell memberships in the community. So if that's an idea you had, how to make it profitable, oh, well, we'll start charging to non-employees, invite the community in. That's not an option. The reason why is because it's too big of a liability. The insurance costs that the company would have to take on to start operating a community fitness center, even in terms of just expanding the parking lot, and then again, the liabilities and the insurance, it would just be overwhelming. So it's not a viable idea. The fitness center cannot start charging employees. That doesn't make sense. There's not enough of them using it to begin with. That's a little hint. So getting more people in the company to start using the fitness center is a good strategy to start making it more profitable, and the research that you do should tell you why that's the case. The claims department results that you as Joe are excited about, those are great, but they're not causal. And you can, if you're not sure what that means, you can Google the word, but it basically is saying that there's no evidence that the results that Joe saw in his department are actually connected to usage of the fitness center. It's a nice story. It seems like there's a connection, but there's no actual data behind it, so don't rely too heavily. For your references, when you are citing them within the text, you should use APA formatting, and the same for the reference page that you'll create at the end. Again, APA formatting is only applying to your research. It does not apply to your formatting in any way, shape, or form. And as we already discussed, 2 sources are required. More is better, but really just like 3. 2 to 3 is just fine. Okay, so let's move on to the writing topic that is important in this unit, and that's using persuasion in writing. So I want to share with you 10 techniques that I think work really well to get what you want out of a piece of writing. And we'll start off just with a general discussion of persuasion, just because I think that it's good to remind everybody that you are already good at being persuasive. And the reason why is because you've had years and years to practice it. We've all been using persuasion since we were kids. So I'm going to kind of just run you through a timeline of examples to show you that you're already really familiar with this stuff. You probably just aren't aware of how often you use persuasive techniques in your daily life. So think about when you are a kid and you want something, say a cookie or an ice cream cone, and in order to get it, you figure out I can just promise mom something that she wants and then she'll give me what I want. So it's a very elementary form of persuasion where the wheels are kind of just starting to turn in motion, but it begins at this early age and then we get better at it as we become teenagers. Maybe we are arguing for a truck rather than, the beat up car that our parents want to buy us as our first vehicle. And we realize we can appeal to their sense of emotion by arguing that the truck would keep us safer on the road than the beat up sedan. So we then can harness the power of persuasion as professionals too. We get really good at persuasion, most of us by the time we're adults, and we can rely on all the rhetorical appeals, right? So ethos, pathos, and logos, pulling them all in together to work our way up the ladder or to get a proposal to go through for an idea that you have. So essentially, we start with basic logic as kids, and then we learn to add emotion into it as we get older. And then finally, we're able to kind of bring in this idea of ethos and credibility into persuasion. So, effective persuasion at a professional level is going to include appeals to all 3 of these within one piece of writing to kind of hit all the right notes. So let's get into the first tip, which is be authoritative and establish credibility. So we can do this in a couple of different ways. One of the ways that you can establish your credibility is to share your qualifications or your connections. Also, you can show that you have done your homework, basically. You've done the research and that you're knowledgeable about the topic that you're talking about, and also what your background is. So basic questions. What relevant qualifications do you have as the writer of the memo? Does your connection to the topic build credibility? That's something, I think you could argue either way, that Joe's own fitness routine and his ability, to lead within his department, maybe that does build some credibility for him, even though he's not a doctor or a fitness expert. What kinds of research can you include to strengthen your ideas? And you can do that right up in the front, right? In those first couple of paragraphs, just think about dropping in one bit of research just to show that this is serious, that you've taken Zach's request to write something up pretty seriously. You're not just, recording your thoughts on paper like in a journal. You've done your work and you've got some data to share and it's well cited. And then think about too what kind of background information is going to be necessary to build credibility. What I mean by that, especially specifically in this case, is that you're going to have to educate Zach a little bit about fitness in order for him to understand what you're telling him. So by you sharing with him some background information, you become the teacher, and therefore you build your own credibility. An important note before we go to number 2 is that tone is really, really important. You don't want to be this guy who's in your face and very aggressive. Instead, you want to be more like this guy who is more so just assertive and positive. So just keep in mind that your word choice and your usage of exclamation points, all these different types of things can come across too aggressively. So be firm, but also not over the top. Number 2 is using effective rhetorical questions. So most of us have heard this phrase a lot, or, oh, it's just a rhetorical question. But what it means, I think, is interesting when you think about it. A rhetorical question is not one that is meant to be answered. It is one that is meant to elicit a certain action. Just like our rhetorical appeals and rhetorical strategies, everything is aiming to have whatever our call to action is actually happen. So you can implement rhetorical questions. Again, not be, you'll already probably know the answers to these questions when you're implementing them, but you're just doing it to get an emotional response. Here's the examples. Would you like for the company to make more money? Of course, whoever you're writing to is going to be thinking, yes, I do want that. So you're not asking them because you really want to know. You're asking them to get them like excited and nodding in agreement with you. Would you like employees to be happier at work? Yes. Tell me how. How would you feel if the company had to let 10 people go? Well, that would suck. I wouldn't want to do that. So you can see there's a difference too with a rhetorical question. It can be sunshine and rainbows. You can get someone excited and eager and curious, or you can kind of do the doom and gloom, scare tactics a little bit, if you will, and that can be effective too. And you can blend the two in one piece, not blend, but you can use both in one piece of writing. So number 3 is using repetition. I don't mean literally. Repetition of exact words is not a good strategy under any writing circumstance. Instead, you're going to repeat key ideas. So in this particular memo, we're telling Zach that fitness can be valuable to the company, and we want to repeat that idea in many different ways throughout the memo. And that can be the case with any piece of writing. Whatever that main message is that you're sending, repeat it in many different ways. Just take many different avenues to get there and lead your reader right back to where you want them at every turn. So you're really thinking about a theme. Here's an example. This is something a student wrote for me years ago. So they wrote, I deserve an A on this assignment because of the hard work I've done. Over the past 2 weeks, I've spent countless hours researching and brainstorming. Even though I was initially confused, I reviewed the instructions and asked questions until I was on the right track. I believe my efforts have earned me an A. So you can see the student here did a really good job just in this paragraph making a short argument for their grade. And one of the ways that they did that was by repeating the key ideas. I've underlined these words. So they're going from deserve to hard work, countless hours, reviewing instructions, asking questions, effort, and earning something. It all kind of leads somewhere. We start with deserve, we end with earned, and there's a very clear pathway just because of the word choices. So number 4 is be consistent. So remember number 3, oh, I can't go back. And number 3, we're talking about repeating key ideas and kind of having a theme to always keep reminding your reader what you want them to be thinking and doing. This goes along with that. So be consistent in your tone with the way that you are organizing your different sections, your paragraphs, and with that theme. You don't want to radically shift gears when you're establishing an overarching theme. It's confusing. That's why. So number 5, offer reasons for them to agree with you in your piece of writing. In this case, Zach. Don't stop at telling your reader just what they should do, in this case, keeping your fitness center open, but tell them why. When you tell someone why they should be doing it, it gives a sense of understanding and participation and value. So it's really important to back up your ask with the reason for the ask, and in our case, and in many cases, we're going to use research to do that. Basically, you're explaining yourself, and when we use research, we explain ourselves while building credibility at the same time. Number 6 is use comparisons. Comparisons are things in writing like metaphors, similes, and analogies. So here's a simple, super simple example of just a comparison. Happy employees are like kids on Halloween. They are motivated to work hard for their rewards. I really could probably and should probably use healthy employees are like kids on Halloween, motivated to work hard for their rewards because it's more relevant to the case. But you can see the comparison, right? The simple comparison between healthy employees are motivated, comparing that to the excitement of little kids on Halloween who are motivated. The image here is also a comparison where you could say that the man walking the tightrope is an independent coffee shop who's opening up amongst the sharks down below, like Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks and all the big names in the industry. And they have to walk very carefully and make sure to hold their balance and stay above the shark-infested waters. Otherwise, they will fail. So you can use an image as well if you feel like that's going to be helpful, and you can explain that image within your writing. I wouldn't necessarily recommend explaining what I just did, but it's still an option that you have if you come across an image that you think works as a great comparison. Number 7 is agitate and solve. So this is where on the front end of your document, either on the opening paragraphs or the opening pages, depending on the length, you're going to intentionally agitate or irritate your reader. So you're going to get them kind of like worked up about a problem by proving that it is a problem and how bad of a problem it is and what the negative impact will be. And then you become the hero on the back end, and you do that by solving the problem for them. So you're really priming them to be very receptive to whatever it is that you're suggesting, whatever your call to action is. Predict the results. So give your reader some idea what they can expect. If you leave it up to the imagination, it could go somewhere you don't want it to go. So you put the ideas there for them. Some examples on how you can do this. If you follow my recommendations, I believe that the company will see, a 30% increase in profit over the next 3 years, so something like that. So if my recommendations are not taken into consideration, however, I predict XYZ, something negative. So kind of like one of the slides we looked at before, you can go happiness and rainbows or gloom and doom when it comes to predicting the results. I think I really prefer the more positive approach on this one, but that's not to say that the doom and gloom can't work or doesn't work. Number 9, predict your readers' questions and objections. This is the single most important slide of the presentation, maybe even of the class, to be honest. You should always be thinking about what your reader is going to object to in your writing, what they're not going to like. Um, what is it that you're saying that they might take issue with or not, maybe not even understand all the way? So thinking like your reader, like stepping away from your piece of writing for at least an hour, if not days, sometimes weeks. If you are writing on, a bigger project and you write for a living, you might be spending weeks and months with a piece of writing. So then you have to take an extended time away from it. And when you come back, you want to try to read it like you hate it. Read it like you want to just tear it apart and find a problem in every sentence. And that's a really effective way to go back into your writing and actually revise it. Not just edit it and change punctuation, the kind of minor revision that I typically see, but truly go in and rework your words so that you get the result that you want. All of that being said, provide answers and solutions before your reader can object. So you're going to anticipate, like you can start thinking like your reader by using these phrases, like, but what if it didn't work out this way? Or, but what if we just did it this way instead? Or, but what if we just gave everyone a free gym membership to the gym down the street? Well, that goes back to the actual first slide when I mentioned that the case being in rural Utah was important. The fitness center holds a bit of a unique value for employees because they're in a rural area. meaning that they're not likely to be surrounded by a fitness center on every corner the way that we are here in suburbia. So just if you watched this long, you got that little tip. I'm not sure about how this would work, right? How will you make this happen? How will you make this happen within this time frame? So skepticism, dislike for the ideas, wear those hats and apply them to your own writing, and then go back in and fix the problems. And number 10 is really just a reminder to use your rhetorical appeals. Make sure that you're doing so with intention, and it will improve the persuasiveness and the quality of your writing. So this is just the overview, the 10 tips that we talked about. You don't have to use all of them. You can use all of them. Make sure you use some of them. It's something I'll be looking for when I'm grading the assignments, just to make sure that there is intentional persuasion within your writing. So wrapping up just with some due dates, the planning log for this assignment is due on Friday the 16th, and the assignment itself is due, we have 2 weeks in this unit, so it's due on Sunday, February 25th. Make sure that you check in on the discussion board, those of you who are participating on the discussion board, and let me know if you have any questions.